Welcome to the Social Impact Level Up podcast. This is where we blur the lines between business, nonprofit, and impact. Social entrepreneurs in our community share their stories of how they are changing the world and building a legacy of health, wealth, happiness, and wellness. I'm your host, Wendy V, along with my co-host, Rodrigo Bravo. Together, we're social entrepreneurs building a collective of impactful humans who are going to make this world a better place. We hope you'll join us. Here's today's episode. If you've been rocking with our podcast, you know that we've been doing it messy this entire first season. This is our season of growth, and we talk about that in this podcast. Not being an imposter, making sure you show up and you take the next step is how you get to step 50. You can't go from 1 to 50. You have to take all the trials and errors in the middle. Here's what our episode is about today: getting past imposter syndrome. So the topic today is, are you an imposter? And there's a couple of different things in the blog post, but one of them that I wanted folks to go grab, if you could, while you're listening to this. And if you're listening to the podcast version, the link is in the notes, so you can go and grab it as well. But there is a list of faces and imposter feelings, and they're in one of those little fun charts, like when you were in school and you were trying to figure out what your feelings were. So I made it the other day, of course, in Canva. I know Rodrigo loves Canva. I love Canva. So I made this chart the other day of imposter feelings and imposter thoughts, and I wanted to make it a freebie so folks could download it. So that's what's there. If you want to go download it, go for it. And one of the things that I love about imposter syndrome is that there's so many different feelings that go along with it that we forget that imposter syndrome is actually the collection of all of those feelings and thoughts. And so we might be having any number of them, but I wanted to name off the ones that are in the freebie, so it gives you guys a little bit of time to go and get it. But also just know that there's way more. This is not a comprehensive list of imposter feelings, but this is what's in the freebie essentially. So you're feeling regretful, unsure, disappointed, helpless, self-sabotaging, dwelling on your past mistakes, having self-judgment, perfectionism, self-doubt, fear of failure, being unsure, procrastinating, which is my way of saying procrastinating, humiliated, unenthused, agonized, over prepping, relieved, fear, desperate, embarrassed, disbelieving, negative self-talk, frightened, and anxiety. So there's a couple in there that I actually left as they're not actually imposter syndrome feelings. So those are find the ones that are actually not imposter feelings. That's part of the activity. But there's a lot of them in there that make up this sort of set of imposter thoughts or imposter feelings. So Christina, I know you just got here. We're going over up in the top. There is a link to a freebie that has a bunch of imposter feelings on a chart. And so I'm talking about them just because I wanted to have a conversation and hear from other people how often some of these feelings come up for you. And you might not be calling it imposter syndrome, right? You might not be calling them imposter feelings. They might just be feelings like dwelling on past mistakes or procrastinating or even over prepping. Those might just be behaviors and things that you're doing, but you don't really know what the root of it is. So that's what the conversation is about today, is how do you have you had any of these feelings, is I guess the first question. And then how do you process them and work through them and get to a place that's actually productive when you're feeling like these things? So that's what we're talking about today, Rodrigo. And I hope that's enough for you, framing for you to like hop in. And I'm going to start pinging more people into the room.
There are a lot of different feelings when it comes to imposter syndrome. And so what you listed right now obviously is not all inclusive, but those are kind of the main ones, right? When folks are when you're having these feelings, these thoughts, and possibly even going through imposter syndrome. I think that's why it's important to kind of list those out, because you may not go through all of them, but you might go through some of them. And I think some of the it's more of a collection, right? And I read the post there And you made a great point there where it's a collection of feelings, not necessarily just one or two, or just when you suddenly feel like you're a fraud or something like that. So it is important that you're aware of that, and I mean that's just the way most you know uh, um, characterizations of syndromes are. It's a collection of stuff that kind of makes you feel that way. And so I think it's important that we do have this conversation and talk about it. Why do you feel like an imposter? Or are you just having moments of doubt, or are you really going through imposter syndrome? Are you going through these feelings of imposter? And it is important because at the end of the day, all these things, they become self-limiting at the points, and you can really do yourself some disservice and really some harm if you don't tackle these from the get-go, especially for like folks like you and I, Wendy, who are, first gen when it comes to our college experiences, when it comes to having our own businesses, perhaps, or we're the first ones, first gen here in the United States. There's a lot of things that go on because of our upbringing, because of the trajectory of our parents and our family, that will definitely give us the, I guess, the inclination to be part of that imposter syndrome. And so it's noteworthy to say what the feelings are and all that, but it's important to characterize them as a group of feelings, a collection of feelings that you can have. That if again, if it's pervasive, it can definitely limit you. It can definitely make you think twice and make you withhold your ability to really progress and limit yourself. So yeah, no, it's good. I've encountered that myself. I'm sure you have as well, Wendy. And I think it's a good topic to discuss, especially because we are entrepreneurs, and how this imposter syndrome can affect us.
Yeah, so I think that the collection of them, in my experience, has been over time. I've had different ones, right? I haven't had all of them at once where I'm feeling like, oh, okay, all of these things are bothering me. I've at times felt like, oh, I'm dwelling too long on past mistakes, or I'm not particularly excited about this opportunity, and I'm thinking it's not. I'm just thinking about the fact that I'm not excited. I'm not asking myself, well, why am I not excited? And if I think about why I'm not excited, then I get to the point of, oh, there's something here that I don't want to deal with. And so rather than do this thing and have to deal with myself or deal with my past experience where I felt like a fraud or I didn't feel like somebody recognized my expertise or whatever, then, that's what's making me feel unenthused. So sometimes even the feelings, if you don't dig in, you don't really understand why you're having them, and they'll just keep being pervasive. And so you'll just get used to the cycle of these feelings being part of how you're living. So as they come up, like you no longer think about, oh, well, why am I fearing failure? Like why is this happening? And when it happens, you don't take the moment to stop and breathe and think about it and then process where you can go from there. And so the whole premise of working on some of your imposter feelings, like Rodrigo said, is so you don't get in that cycle and then you get off track with whatever it is that you're trying to do. So if you're trying to accomplish something in particular, you have a goal, or you're trying to reach a certain status or certain level, and you are constantly questioning yourself or questioning your abilities. When you're constantly questioning your abilities, you don't get to progress in the way that you should be progressing. So hey Jessica and hey Destroy, we're here talking about imposter feelings, and there's a little chart freebie thing that I put together in the link if you want to grab that. But I just went through a bunch of them, and Rodrigo and I are just talking about, what does that look like for you as you go through your journey, whether that's over time, or, I was just saying you don't have all of these feelings at once. Sometimes you might encounter one or two, and then as you go through new experiences, you'll encounter other ones. And I'll talk about the feelings again in a minute, but I'm just going to invite you guys up if you guys want to join us. Feel free to come up. Okay. Hey, how are you?
I'm great. Sorry, just trying to maneuver on the phone. But I think, engaged into the conversation and also that you're leading it. And I think, a little bit more, um, I guess, insight is always appreciated. Me being somebody who's been in the entertainment space for some time, I'm always open to these concepts, to these ideas and thought processes that some of us aren't really have the time to sit down and really break it down. So I guess I don't have the opportunity to sit because I'm driving to look at your form. I just opened it up, but I'm here for the talk, and
I love it. I love it.
I'll listen.
Yeah, chill, chill, and drive safely, of course. And I can always back channel it to you if you're interested. Hey, Jessica, how are you? Um, So we are talking about, so I'll reset the room because I saw that Josh and Daniela came in. So we're talking about imposter feelings and imposter thoughts today. And the question of the day is, are you an imposter? And what I mean by that is not, are you right now faking who you are and pretending to be someone you're not? So this is our Tinder swindler moment. But really, have you had any of these feelings recently? And have these led to thoughts that have been not helpful for you on your journey? So I'll go through them again because there is a little chart up at the top. There's a couple in here that are not imposter feelings. Those are the ones that are kind of snuck in there. I think I forgot to change them or I just left them there. But I'll go through the ones that are imposter feelings, and then you can download the chart as the freebie on the link at the top of the room. So regretful, unsure, disappointed, helpless, self-sabotaging, dwelling on your past mistakes, self-judgment, perfectionism, self-doubt, fear of failure, being unsure of yourself, procrastinating, humiliated, unenthused, agonized, over prepping, fear or fearful, desperate, embarrassed, disbelieving, negative self talk, frightened, and having anxiety. So, all of these are types of feelings and thoughts, and they can lead to thoughts that will make you feel like you don't deserve what you're getting, that you are a fraud and someone's going to find out, that you don't deserve this, or you're just there because you got lucky. And so you don't really fully own into the things that you are supposed to be bringing into your life. So that's what we're talking about today. And I know Jessica and Christina, you guys just joined us, and Christina, you've been here for a minute. So if either of you want to share or jump into the conversation, feel free.
I just want to say that I never experienced any of this. I am perfect, and therefore there is no need for me to listen. I'm just kidding. But so the way I guess I try to combat this, and Wendy, you know this about me, is like I check in with my body, and I feel like, and we've had this conversation, like imposter syndrome for women is very it has a lot more to do with the expectations that have been placed on us from the beginning of us entering into the world, just because of how our bodies work. And so um a lot of times when we, like, and I'm speaking in the context of like owning our business or working on a project, we tend to have to show up in spaces that are predominantly male and kind of work in on that level. And so when we don't measure up and we're too tired and we're exhausted, um, a lot of times it's because of where we're at in our body. And like, we've talked about this in other rooms, like I cycle sync. So there are certain times in my body that I'm not going to show up the same way. And so prior to that, and we were talking about this earlier, and Ali and Christina were in there. We as women or individuals who have wombs or a uterus. Okay, my daughter wants her granola bar. Here you go. We've been conditioned to push through from the time we were in grade school, right? To push through our bodies, push through doing things in order to get the work done. And we would feel so frustrated with ourselves when we're too tired because we can't show up one way, or, we, we don't necessarily have the same level of energy as we did another portion of the month. And so we get frustrated because we're wondering why we can't show up. And then that, I feel like for me, that's when all the doubts start to creep in, because I want to be able to level up, right? And I want to be able to do all the things that I should be doing, but what should I be doing? And what lens is it coming through? And I feel like for a lot of women, a lot of how we have to show up is like a lot of us don't realize the educational system was created here in America, like when we had to mass produce a lot of things during the Great Depression. So you had like all these worker mills, and a lot of it was, we had to push through, and arts and creativity wasn't really something that was celebrated. And I feel like that's a whole other lecture for another day. But the reality of it is that we literally were working on a 9 to 5 schedule, which again doesn't work with us. Like, and so we experience burnout, and when we experience burnout, we experience imposter syndrome. And so for women in particular, and that, because that's what I can speak to, and I like to speak from, I guess, my own narrative and experience, is that we have to kind of release this expectation and pressure, um, on ourselves, because we need to understand our bodies and the creative power that we have in order for us to really be able to fully push through these feelings. And yes, shit happens, and like, you have all these things that come against you, but honestly, like understanding that I wasn't designed or created to show up in this space the way a man would, has taken off so much of the pressure. But also it's allowed me to be able to cope with the fact that, wait, like this system was designed to work against me rather than with me, and so therefore I have to make my own rules. And I think that that's my TED talk for the day. Thank you.
No, I love it. Yes, I agree that there's not a lot of things that were set up for women from the get-go. In fact, I think a lot of things were made by men for us. So, Christina, do you want to jump in?
Sure. What I was going to say is I've noticed my imposter syndrome has evolved over the last 3 years that I've started my business. I feel like it was very strong in the beginning, and then I got more comfortable with certain aspects, and then other aspects got more where I felt like I was being an imposter, and then I'd overcome that. But it's evolving, and it's interesting that it's doing that. And sometimes I don't recognize what the next imposter thing is going to be until I'm in it. And I'm like, what? Like for example, recently I thought I was feeling really good about my business. I'm like, okay, I can do this. I just launched an app. I'm going to get this going. And then I caught myself after the app has been out for a few months going, exactly why am I not marketing it? Why am I not doing certain things? It seems to me like I should be focusing on that. Hello. And I had to like really look at myself and go, what am I so scared of? And usually when I ask that question, what am I so scared of? I find my answers. Cause that's typically where my imposter system like is rooted, is in my fears. So, but it's been different, and it's been interesting to see the journey. And I wonder what will be the next thing too.
Ooh, yes. And that's why I wanted to talk about this, because it does change. There's not a time, like I said, where you feel all of these feelings at once, or you go through experiences, and sometimes you'll feel one feeling, and then it'll be quickly followed by another one and another one. And it just depends on how you get used to dealing with them. But one of the things I explain in the training is that as you get in this cycle, you spend a lot of time thinking through and not actually doing. So as you get stuck in this cycle of imposter syndrome, you kind of have the thought, you have this feeling that corresponds with it, and those two go very closely together. So a thought might look like, I I'm judging myself for not spending time on marketing my app, right? So I could say something like, "Oh, well, you did all these other things and you didn't do shit for the app, right?" So that's my thought. what it makes me feel like is, oh, I'm regretful now that I spent my time on other things. And, those other things might have been perfectly helpful to your business, might not have been helpful to the app, but they might have been helpful to something else. But now you're feeling regretful about how you actually were using your energy, right? Rather than taking that same amount of time and putting it towards actually marketing the app. So when you're thinking about this cycle, the reason that you want to learn how to interrupt your thoughts and really reframe your feelings is because we have so many of these all the time, right? And so our brain is just constantly going through this cycle, going through this cycle. So the less time you can spend thinking and feeling as an imposter, the more time you can actually spend doing the things you need to be doing. So feel free to jump in, anyone.
Along those same lines, I was going to ask, I find that my feeling of being an imposter is directly correlated to what I consider success. So, and that looks different in different avenues. So, for example, with the marketing, my fear is that I'm going to put a lot of money into this, and I'm going to put a lot of effort, and still nobody's going to download the app. But how I would get rid of the imposter syndrome would be if I was actually seeing results. And so that would be the success of how I view success with that particular example. And I don't want to base getting rid of imposter syndrome off of success. There should be a different way to measure it. But right now, that's kind of where I'm at personally. Do you have any suggestions for how to shift that way of thinking?
Jessica started talking about this earlier. Jessica, do you want to jump in again about the kind of measuring success against unrealistic standards?
Yeah, as I was saying before, that a lot of times we're kind of operating in a society that really wasn't designed for women. And so it's one of the main reasons why I cycle sync, because if I set realistic expectations for myself and my body, I can show up. It's kind of like when we have the flu, we're not going to work the same way, right? So with our bodies, particularly for women, we have different levels of energy in different phases of the month because we have 4 phases to our cycle. And so I remember I was talking with Wendy. This was like a while back, and she was just like, she had to get a bunch of stuff done. But obviously, we are women, we have our periods, and she was really tired. And I said, you're not supposed to be pushing yourself through this month. You need to just rest. And even Cynthia, who, she's not here right now, that was another thing. Like, she too, she busts her ass. Like, y'all, she works into the night sometimes. And she would get frustrated because she would get really, really tired, because we, in our minds, as I said earlier, we've been conditioned to work and push through. And so she too has learned, just in our own conversations as friends, but she doesn't need to show up in the same way as a man, or to show up in a world where it's more male leading expectations. And unfortunately, that's the world we do live in. And so when we learn about our bodies and we educate ourselves about our bodies, I think we're able to give ourselves a little more grace, because we're like, oh, that's why. So some things that I do, for instance, is like right now, I've literally, like, I'm in a different phase of my cycle. So I plan out my month. And obviously, it's not going to go according to plan all the time, but I plan out the important things of like, this is when I have the most energy. So this is when I'm going to get shit done, compared to the end of the month where I'm like, oh, this is when I'm like super low energy, and I'm just going to focus on tying up loose ends. So if I have a deal, like, and I've closed it out, I'm going to send the last of the report, stuff like that. Because I think that when we do that, rather than trying to create and curate during specific times, we really, really work against out who we are and who we're actually like biologically designed to be. I feel like yeah, that's probably the proper way. So I feel like that's something to consider. Um, and when we set those expectations for ourselves, we're not going to be disappointed. I hope that made sense. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And that energy cycle is real. And it just feels like so unfair that, that women are the only ones that go through this and men don't, I guess. Maybe they have their own thing, but it's so, so real.
Oh, it's very real. Very, very
But
real.
it's also why we're incredibly powerful, right? Because we literally everything, and I've also said this, everything we create comes from a very spiritual component of our womb spaces. And so when we tap in and work with that part of our body, you will start to see how that affects and impacts how we show up, because it is our greatest manifester. And I know Tasha, Tasha and I, we've talked about this, and even in her spaces, because she too cycles things. And really, it's a game changer. Like, I don't really push a lot of things, but it, I see how it's impacted my life, even as a mother too, because like, even my husband knows, don't fuck with me when I'm on my period, because I'm not going to do anything. I don't even cook. I'm like, you're going to cook. I'm not going to cook. I'm not going to do much. I mean, I feed my kids, obviously, but I'm also not going to be hosting spaces. I'm not going to be carrying other people's weight the way I would in certain times, and that has helped tremendously, because now I don't feel like, oh, I'm failing society. I am doing what I can with the energy and power that is available to me.
Yeah, and Santi, I want you to jump in too, but of course, I'm not going to leave you hanging on the feminine energy. I was just going to just interject and say the other thing, Christina, that helps me with that is I forget when I'm doing to track my progress. And I mentioned this a couple of rooms ago. We did a whole room on how to track your impact and like what are you really looking at through your business when you're doing these different activities? What are you really doing with the app? So if you're trying to get more people to download it, are you tracking the downloads every month? And then when you sell it, when you see the growth, are you celebrating, or are you looking at it and saying, oh, I need to do more, and judging yourself, right? And then continuing this cycle of negative thoughts. But if you have some way to track growth and track your activities and see how you're progressing, you can create a system for yourself that makes success look different and that you reward yourself for it. So, like, I'm a big fan of ice cream. So, every once in a while, I'm just like, I did a good job. I'm going to go get some ice cream. And I go buy myself ice cream. And, it doesn't mean that I'm successful in that I made money that day, right? Because we all know as entrepreneurs, there are a lot of days when you ain't making no money. But the days that you are making money, you feel really good about yourself and you're like, yes, that's success. But if you don't want that as a measure, you can create other measures. And so that would be the other thing I would encourage you to do, is to find another way. And if you think about it in terms of kids, because I know you deal with parenting, you're creating a token economy for yourself, essentially, as an adult, because you know that there are things that incentivize you externally and you've learned them through the course of your lifetime. And it's time that we lean into our little kid tendency to be like, no, I want this. And when I want that, I feel better. And that's okay. So if that means I want to go eat ice cream because I want to feel successful today because I did a shit ton of tasks today, I'm going to go eat some ice cream and I'm going to feel good about it. And I'm not going to worry about the sugar or the calories or the whatever. So I think that you just have to kind of go inward a little bit, like Jessica was suggesting with your cycle. But I also would suggest with, well, what is the impact that you're really trying to make? Because you actually have impact in your business name, which I love, because that's totally in my model as well. But I think what does that look like and what does success look like can be redefined by you, because it is your business. So I hope that's helpful to you. And then we'll go to Santi.
Hey y'all, sorry I came in a little late. I've been on back-to-back calls, and now, like always, picking up my daughter from school. So just joining the room, joining the conversation. As far as the topic for today, are you an imposter? I'm a huge fan of Gary Vaynerchuk. I don't know if you guys check him out or not, but I remember he said one of these things that really resonated with what I was seeing a lot, that people are they're just posing, or if they want the hustle, they want to be entrepreneurs and they want to do all this stuff, but they just want the title, they don't want to put the work behind it. And I think it's super important, for example, for those of us that are really, really adamant about creating your own path via entrepreneurship, is that are you willing to recognize the amount of work it takes? because a lot of people just see what they see from the outside in, like, oh my God, this guy is always on the go, he's always grinding, he's got all this stuff coming at him. But they don't really see the details, the fine details of like the every single day, how we're stuck on our phones because we're either creating content, or we're fielding emails, phone calls. I'm one of those people that my mind just continuously just runs on a daily basis. It just goes at a million miles per hour. So like I literally write things down to the smallest chores and tasks, because I know for a fact that an email comes in, I'm like, crap, I gotta answer this thing, and then I'll just completely forget. So that's a good way to hold myself accountable. But a lot of people don't see that. There's a lot to what you do as an entrepreneur. And another thing that also resonates with me is that you have to fall in love with the path, with the journey. Not necessarily that you're working because, oh my God, I want to make $1 million and I'm going to work towards that. And you just focus on that, on that achievement. And you kind of lose your way because you get frustrated, because entrepreneurship it's a giant roller coaster of emotions. You're up, you're up one day and you're down for like 3 or 4 days, and you just want to you're like, oh, what the hell, damn this all to hell, and I'm just gonna get a 9 to 5 and whatever. I want stability. But at the end of the day, you're only lying to yourself, because if you really, really want it, then you shouldn't give up. And that's why he mentions you got to fall in love with the hustle, with the journey. You got to fall in love not if you're at point A, you don't want to go after just concentrate on point B. You want to definitely focus on that journey and really enjoy that, because that'll just make it even better. So that's it for me. I'm sorry I came in late again. Wendy, Rodrigo, Jessica, and everybody down there is listening, and I'm done speaking for now.
Ooh, yeah, the journey. Absolutely. Rodrigo, jump in.
Yeah, I think that's one of the critical things that I've done that has helped me kind of succeed, is making sure that I appreciate the journey, but also set milestones while throughout that journey. If you like Santiago's example, right? My goal is to make $1 million, right? It's gonna take a while, and if you look at yourself and say, "Man, I didn't make $1 million today. Man, I didn't make $1 million today," and every day you look at that goal, and you haven't accomplished that $1 million goal, you really are betraying your own journey, because at the end of the day, it's gonna be stupid difficult to get $1 million in one day, right? But if you break that down and give yourself milestones, right? Give yourself these goals that you can achieve. Okay, you know what? I'm gonna get certified in XYZ. Great. Okay, I'm gonna now go ahead and advertise this. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and do this, and even break those goals, those milestones into smaller goals. You can definitely see the progress now. From going, okay, well today I made $100, today I make $200. Da, 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 da. Sure, you haven't made $100 million. That's not, that's your ultimate goal, right? But you're not self-sabotaging yourself by not accomplishing that goal, by setting up other goals that are going to get you to your ultimate goal. So I think that's another important thing, another way to kind of avoid that imposter syndrome of saying like, oh, I haven't made it, I didn't get the results I wanted, oh my God, this and that. I've fallen in that rabbit hole, if you will, myself, where I characterize things in a way that honestly I wouldn't even, I was going to be impossible for me to accomplish. And so that's why I think it's important to break those goals down and also give yourself some grace with those goals. I'm not a marketer, I'm not a graphic designer, even, I'm not this, I'm not that. And if I try my hand in it and I do something with it, I got to give myself some grace and say, okay, I'm doing this. I'm an entrepreneur. I don't want to spend the money. I'm probably not going to get the results that I want if I had gone with a graphic illustrator or designer or whatever. So I'm giving myself a little bit of grace that maybe this is not going to hit as much as if I had gotten somebody else to do it. Give yourself that grace. If you're not a marketer but you're out there marketing, that you're essentially picking up another tool and learning how to use that tool at the same time that you're trying to apply that tool. So success is going to be rare, success is going to be hard. You keep practicing, you keep determining, and maybe again setting up those goals, those little micro goals, that way you can achieve your milestone, so that eventually you can say, hey, I did a great job on this. But you can't say I did a great job with this if you're starting from scratch and maybe you don't even know how to start that. You don't know how to do this. You don't know how to do that, and you're learning on your own. We all know that as entrepreneurs, we kind of bootstrap ourselves, right? And I know, Wendy, you've done a fantastic job of this, where you have essentially created like a podcast, right? We have this podcast thing going on. You didn't know anything about really like kind of editing audio or doing replays or repurposing content or anything like that. But you've done it and now you're really good at it. However, if somebody had told you at the very beginning when you first started and you limited yourself and you said, oh man, that wasn't that great. Maybe it wasn't that great, but you kept going. You kept doing it. You said, okay, I learned how to do this now. Now I'm going to learn how to do this. Now I'm going to learn how to do this. Now you're to a point where, man, 6, 7, 8 steps ago, you didn't even see yourself at this point. So I think it's really important for you, for us to create little mini goals or goals within the goals within those milestones to see that success and to see the achievements that we do, and then B, give ourselves grace to make sure that, hey, if we're tackling something that's new, that's really not our foray, that's not our forte, I'm sorry, that's not our expertise, give yourself grace for that. You know what I'm saying? Give yourself some leeway to go ahead and learn and to apply those principles, relearn, and go forward and not self-sabotage ourselves because we are learning that new skill or that toolbox that we're using. I just wanted to add that in.
Oh, I love that you mentioned the podcast because I put the link up. So everybody, we're finally on Apple Podcasts. So go get our podcast. And Rodrigo and I are like changing stuff up right now. So we're not going to do an episode this week, but we'll do it next week. So back to what you were saying about that though. Yeah, of course we're all, I think everybody, Jessica, Santi, you and we're all entrepreneurs. I think a lot of people in this room are, and a lot of people in this room are doing their own marketing, doing their own, planning and executing and launching and all of the things, and every single one of those things you could literally buy a coach for each part of the process, right? If you wanted to, you could spend millions of dollars just getting help. And I think a lot of folks are not looking for that because you want to be able to get the success is a little bit sweeter when it's self-earned, right? And I think that that's one of the pieces that the stubbornness in me is still like, don't give things up yet until you really understand what's going on. And then once you understand what's going on, happily give them up, which is why I'm like, Rodrigo, edit all the podcasts, please, because I want no more of this editing business. But if I needed to, because Rodrigo couldn't, or the person I hired couldn't, could I step in and make sure that a podcast episode gets out that week? Yes. And the other thing that I wanted to say about that is I know with Ale and Jessica, they've taken my Level Up Accelerator, which is really about creating a social business or a nonprofit organization. And when you're doing that, you're taking these ideas and putting them out into the world. But part of the problem is you don't really know what your plan is, and you just start doing things like kind of haphazardly. You're like, oh shit, that didn't work. Oh shit, that didn't work. And then that can make you think that you're not successful, or that can make you think that, oh, I'm sitting here, quote unquote, faking it till I make it, but everybody knows I'm faking it, and everybody is now watching me because I've asked them to watch me. So you're like, great, now I've got all this stuff going on and I don't know what to do. So the whole point of creating a plan is partially so you can track your progress and do what Rodrigo was talking about, which is called chunking your work, essentially. So you're chunking your work into smaller goals that help you actually get them done. So that process of doing that and having a way to track it, the tool to track it, is what I created in the accelerator. And as I was creating that, my 12-week plan, one of the things in my 12-week plan was to create the accelerator. Then it was to pilot the accelerator. Now it's to get people into it, right? And so as I'm going through the process, each part of the process takes new skills and new things that I have to bring in. And success looks different each time I'm going through the iterations of the process. And along the way, any of the ways I could have felt like an imposter through any part of that process. So as I was getting ready to launch the podcast, same thing. On my 12-week plan board, I had, in the next 12 weeks, I want to launch this podcast. That sat there for months and months. It was definitely several 12-week plans before I actually just did it. And I just did it on a Friday night and pulled all this stuff together off of my profile here on Clubhouse and pulled it together as a podcast, including making the music, right? Because it just went all the way out. And once I was able to do that, I was able to then hone that skill quicker and quicker and quicker. So where people would have been like, "Oh, are you a podcaster?" The day before on Thursday, I'd have been like, "No." The Saturday, so he's like, "Are you a podcaster?" Hell yeah, I have a podcast. Here's the link, right? So it's you have to step into that new role in a full way and not feel like an imposter, because then once you're in the space and people are asking you, "Well, can I be on your podcast as a guest?" What are you going to tell them? No, I don't have a podcast. So, no. Yes, I am a podcaster. Yes, you can be on my podcast. Here's the process, right? And you create the next step of the process, the next step of the process.
I think it's interesting, Wendy, when you talk about owning those achievements, right? And part of owning those achievements is saying, "Hey, I'm a podcaster," right? And again, that goes from us making false comparisons. When we talk about a podcast, we're probably thinking of like one of the top podcasts out there, on Apple, on Spotify, right? All these podcasts. And so when somebody says I'm a podcaster, obviously you're going to make the comparison, or most people would make the comparison. We make the comparison, right? Oh, well, I'm a podcaster, right? And now you're comparing yourself to this, top-notch compare. That's the false comparison, and that's where we get stuck sometimes in that imposter syndrome, in that kind of fraudulent mind state, because we're comparing ourselves to the wrong people. What we may want to aspire to be that, we want to be that, right? But right now, we're the podcasters. You said it the other day. We have 10 podcast episodes now. Most podcasts don't even get to 10. Right, right, Wendy. I remember you were telling me about that quote, that statistic.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so already we when you want to make a fair comparison, that's the comparison you want to make. So again, that's kind of looking at it and looking at those achievements and realizing that you have achieved a goal, right? Are we at $1 million, like Santiago said earlier? At that, I mean, I'm trying to think of a podcast, I mean, okay, I'm just gonna say it, right, the Joe Rogan podcast, right? Everybody knows about it. I know there's
I was going to
controversy.
say it, and nobody wants to say it.
But he has like one, if not not the best, the most listened to podcast in the world, right? Are we going to make that comparison to them? That $1 million, or are we making the comparison right now to the podcasters in our range that are where we're at right now? No, we're going to make the latter, because that's the more appropriate comparison. And right now, that's a victory right there. We've already gotten to a stage where most podcasts don't make it to. Now, is there room for improvement? Yes. Is there things that we could do better? Yes. Is there other things? Yes, 100%. We can do all kinds of things way better. But damn, that's a victory. We got somewhere now. We are being consistent. We are doing the damn thing, and we're learning as we go. Those are victories. Even if we say like, okay, maybe I only got two listeners or 3 followers or whatever the case it is, it doesn't matter. We've already made it to a point where most podcasts don't make it. And so just realizing that achievement, that goal, that could be the springboard for inspiring you to continue that work, to continue to get better, to continue to get going and make it happen. I'll share one last story. There's a podcast, an educator's podcast. I listen to a lot of educational podcasts, but one of them is the Drive with Shay and Path. And so this is a couple. They are educators in Toronto, and they have two podcasts. One of them is a strictly educational driven podcast. Another one's kind of a music podcast that weaves in education. And I remember when they first started, when I first met them, they had just started. They were on like a podcast episode number maybe 21 or something, and they were all over the place. I mean, God bless their hearts. They did not know what they were doing. I didn't even know how to help them, to be honest with you, back then, right? I was like, man, but they were so full of ambition. They were like, no, we're gonna make it. We're just gonna do it, and this and that. And now they have a great following. All the educators that I'm connected to on Twitter, especially, follow them. They have their own newsletter. They have their own website. They have all this going on. And it all started because they just said, I'm just going to do it. They didn't have these self-limiting beliefs. They felt they had a message that needed to be shared, and they were authentic. They were themselves. And if you ever, and if anybody ever listens to a podcast, I really recommend that when you listen to the latest, especially a podcast that has maybe 100 episodes, listen to the latest episode, right? And then go back and listen to maybe their first or second or third episode, and you're going to see the growth. You're gonna see the incremental changes. I'm sorry. You're not gonna see those incremental changes. Actually, you're gonna see how big the chasm is between their latest episode to their first episode. And they didn't get there through that. They didn't just make one big old step. No, they every episode they got better. They got better. They set a milestone. They set a formula. They said, okay, I'm gonna do this better next time. Okay, I messed up on this. I'm gonna do this better again. And they realized those small little goals that now they're to the point where they sound professional, they sound like they know what they're doing, and they sound like they've been doing it that way the whole time. And I think that's a really good kind of a testament to not letting yourself become an imposter and fearful of what you can be and being the best version of who you are. I think that would be a great little testament. And hopefully, Wendy, when we're at like episode 100, everybody thinks that we're like been doing this for years, and then they're like, "Oh shit, listen to episode 3. Listen to Rodrigo and Wendy just not know what they're talking about." I think, you know, I don't mean not know what they talk about, but not know like how to actually do a podcast, right? And kind of sequencing things and doing this and that. But it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, these are small steps that we're taking that hopefully one day leads to that quote unquote $1 million podcast episode, like Santiago was saying earlier.
Oh, we're gonna be the $2 million podcast episode because there's two of us, so we need $1 million each. Yeah, no, I agree. There's so many things in there that I wanted to unpack, but I just wanted to also invite anybody else who wants to come up to the conversation. Please feel free to come up. We have a couple more minutes if you have any thoughts or anything that's come up for you while we've been talking about different things, and now we're on podcasting. But I think it's important when you're evolving with your business, that you evolve as a person, and you encounter new things, like we were talking about with Christina. New challenges come up, your imposter syndrome comes up in different ways, and it's not going to always be where you can compare step 3 to step 100. Sometimes you don't even remember or have evidence of step 3, right? You're at step 100 and there's a new challenge in front of you, and you're like, oh shit, I don't feel like I can face this challenge. And you have to just keep going through the process of getting to a place where you can feel like you've stopped the thought, you've squashed this feeling, and you can move forward. So if like Rodrigo or I were at the step 3 and we cared about what our podcast really sounded like to somebody who was about to give us money for a sponsorship, we probably would be a little more pressed to meet than we have been. But we're like, oh, we'll get it done. Okay, yeah. Because neither one of us are thinking, we have so many other things going on that this is not our priority. But trust me, when we're at 1 million episodes and we're making $1 million off of this is still going to be a priority for us to figure out, how do you keep getting to the next step? Because there is always a next step. And if you choose to end, it's not because there isn't a next step, it's because you've chosen to end. So as you're going through this journey, always thinking, well, yeah, success may look like this right now, but in step 50, what will success look like? And how do I get there? And how do I plan for that growth? And one of the things I'm going to be teaching pretty soon is how to align your plan with your budget. So as you're thinking through, okay, it's going to cost me this much to maintain my business, and this is how much I have to budget to maintain my business, just even to keep your website up and to keep your podcast going and to keep your da-da-da, to have all these different costs associated with what you're trying to do, how are you mapping that to the impact that you're currently making? And how are you mapping that to the activities that you're currently doing? Because there is, in each of those steps, success will look a certain way, but success will also cost you a certain amount of money. So, as you grow, success might look like you putting more money to ads because you need more people to come into your pipeline. So that would look a little different each time. The threshold is going to change. And as you go through and invest, are you actually tracking, well, what is the impact I'm getting at this level of investment? So that's what I'm going to go over. And I think it's a very clear, concrete way for like Christina's question of, how do I stop this cycle and how do I give myself credit? Because now you've really figured out, well, this is the impact I'm making for the cost that I'm putting in. So that's, I think, the last thing I have to offer. I don't know, Santi or Rodrigo, if you guys want to add anything to the conversation, but yeah, it's been fun talking about imposter syndrome. And I'm going to put up the link to the blog post again in case anybody missed it.
No, I think you did a great job summarizing that, Wendy. I think that'd be a great note end the episode on. And I want to just appreciate everybody that's been here, supporting us, supporting Santiago, Wendy, and myself as we kind of go through our entrepreneur journey. It is tough, but again, this is why we have this club. The Social Impact Level Up Club is for entrepreneurs mainly, but it's for everybody really. And we try to make sure that we all know that, hey, you're not the only one going through these things. So when somebody mentions that, maybe their marketing plan doesn't work, or when Santiago's talking about like, man, I got meetings left and right doing this and that, or Ale is talking about, hey, I got a big presentation coming up, and I'm not sure how I feel about it, this and that. These are feelings, these are emotions that we all go through. That we entrepreneurs, for the most part, are getting into spaces that they maybe know or maybe they don't know, but there's going to be something where they don't know, that they're not sure of. Now they tackle it whether because of financial reasons, because you don't want to spend that $50 an hour for a graphic designer to do your logo, so you can do it on your own, or you tackle it on because you feel, hey, I'm going to be doing this, I might as well start learning it as I go along. Whatever the case may be, there's always going to be those moments where we do feel that we're inadequate, that we don't know what to do and what's going on. Am I doing this right? And it's really important for us to take a step back and realize, hey, this is part of the journey. This is part of what we got to go through sometimes, and that you're not alone in that journey. I do notice that Melissa just came up on stage and is here to share. Melissa, well, good afternoon. What can you share and contribute in regards to, are you an imposter?
This is such a great topic. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm here from the U.S. I came in because of my Wendy. I love Wendy dearly, and it's nice to meet you too, Rodrigo and Santiago. For me, I think something that you said, Rodrigo, that really resonated was it's a natural feeling as an entrepreneur to feel out of pocket. I own an ed tech company, international ed tech company, and I'm coming from the traditional classroom world. And there were many opportunities for me to question whether or not I was a real business person. And it actually started when I created the company. When I had to describe who I was in the company, I wrestled with calling myself a CEO. I was like, well, am I really? Even though I own the freaking company and I paid for it, I was still questioning if I was the top person. And it's because I was conditioned to work for other people. I went to college to become a classically trained teacher, licensed, and I was trained to work for other people. And it was not a natural thing for me, even though I have, became in my previous profession or previous roles, I became a leader in respective organizations. I still was conditioned that I work for other people. And I think it's that fundamental mindset that creates the feeling that you're fake, that you're not real. And there's a certain amount of reconciliation that has to happen as business owners for us to allow ourselves to take that mantle with pride and to give ourselves patience and grace. I don't think I could have gotten over that feeling of being not a real leader, not the top of my organization, if I didn't learn a concept called absolute patience. I had to learn to be patient with myself. I had to learn to not feel that pressure to know everything. That's why you bring in people. That's why you form partnerships and you ask for volunteers and eventually you bring on staff. You don't know everything. You'll never will know everything about even what's going on in your company. I have 16 people who work for me right now, work alongside me right now. And I don't know everything they're doing in my company. I just don't. I'm not supposed to. I'm not a micromanager. All of my team members are contractors and they do a particular task and they're highly professional. They're highly respected by me. And I have to trust people. I have to trust first and foremost myself that I picked the right people for me for what I know. And when something becomes clear that it needs to change, then I change. I've become a lover of change. Pivoting and shifting is my best friend. I'm not afraid of it anymore. And I think for me, the secret to my success is that I embrace it all. The positive, the negatives, the ups and the downs is all a part of my lessons. And that's what I want to contribute. Melissa, I'm speaking.
Thank you so much for being here. And I think there's a lot of stuff that, most of us don't know in our business. And yeah, we wait for the time when we have a team. And so it's always great to hear from Melissa because she has been at our level and has been, increasingly moving up to a larger business and now has a lot of folks that she works with that she's met here on Clubhouse. And so she's a great example of how to use this app to really grow what you're trying to do and to put together those partnerships in a way that makes sense for your business, but also helps support the other businesses that are around. And a lot of them are complementary. They might be people that have a similar, like Rodrigo and I work together a lot. We have some commonalities in the people we serve, but not completely, right? But they're complementary and our perspectives are complementary. So there's a lot of people here at Clubhouse to make sure that you're not gonna you're not gonna be flailing in the wind. So definitely use your networks here and get into people's back channels, network, connect, and also collaborate with people off of the app. Rodrigo and I know each other in person. Like I could pick him up out of a lineup of people. Yep, that's Rodrigo right there. That's the man who
Hey,
lives here.
why's it got to be a lineup?
I was gonna say
What
that's
did
the
I
man.
do?
He gonna get you, Wendy.
You don't want to know what lineup you're in? I was gonna say that's the man at the breakfast taco line.
Okay, well, see, that's my PTSD kicking in right there. I'm
I
like, come on,
know.
why you gotta put me in lineup?
I was about to say the taco lineup, but you could go wherever you want to be. But I'm just saying, yeah, we have been literally. Last time I saw him, we were literally eating tacos. So I think that's the beauty of Clubhouse is you're able to connect in a genuine way with other people. Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Social Impact Level Up podcast. From me, Wendy V, and my co-host Rodrigo Bravo, we sincerely appreciate your follows, your likes, your subscribes, and your shares. Make sure that you're reaching out to us on social media. We'd love to hear from you. Have a wonderful day, and remember, keep changing the world.